In this video, I want to share my 3 favorite writing rules from Jerry Seinfeld. I did stand-up comedy for 4 years pretty actively, and he was somebody, of course, that I admired and studied relentlessly, but I definitely studied him even before then because I just loved how he thought about writing. What resonated with me about him was the idea that he was kind of a writer first. Every word that has gone into building his hours and his set over the years has been very meticulously chosen. And the one thing I found very cool was that in a couple interviews, he's echoed, something to the extent of the guy that you see on stage, that's somebody that I invented to really just test out the writing. I'm a writer first. I'm the guy at my desk alone in a room. That's what I enjoy is, combing through every word. And of course, he said it probably in a bit of a different way, but that's the idea. And I don't know, for me, especially the comedians that I gravitated towards when I was doing stand-up were the people who were writers first, not the ones who riffed and, wrote on stage and then fine-toothed it later. I loved the people who they had great rhythm, great structure. And so even outside of a stand-up context, these are still rules that, even though I haven't been on stage for years, that I love kind of implementing into my own writing in all of the different ways that I do it, both personally and for work. So let's dive into the first rule that I found particularly interesting because he shared this on the Tim Ferriss show. And this is something that didn't get millions and millions of views because it was an audio only episode, even on YouTube. I don't think it got the recognition that it deserved. And so I'm hoping that this can help surface it a little bit. One of the things that was notable about that interview, by the way, was that Jerry Seinfeld was a fan of Tim Ferriss. Like you could tell he listened to it. He, even after his time had kind of ran up for the interview, he was basically like, oh, no, I'm going to stay. I'm enjoying the conversation. Let's keep it going. So he took the extra time to keep talking. He highlighted how he loves the way that Tim Ferriss deconstructs and thinks about engineering things, how he thinks about writing and stand-up the same way. And so in that interview, he shares something that I think is more real than what you would get in maybe, advice that he would give on a 5-minute segment on the Tonight Show or something that you saw in the old movie that he did called Comedian. This is more up to date, I feel, even though it was a couple years ago. And it resonates harder because he was talking about this is advice that he gave to his daughter. If you're giving this advice to your kids, obviously you're not just giving them the answer that they want to hear. You're trying to give them something probably that is going to be useful and you're being genuine. And so one of the things that he told his daughter, and she's also applying this to creative writing or fictional writing or something of the sort, I believe, which I think is even cooler that he shared because it shows you that the way that he looks at writing transcends just any medium. It's not just stand-up or fiction or nonfiction or creative writing. He looks and respects at the art form of writing, which I really love. He shared with his daughter how writing is hard work. And so you want to make sure that you reward yourself for it. And so have a start and a stop time. So if it is 2 hours that you are trying to write every day, great. The second that the 2 hours actually goes off is when you are done. And if you don't do that, then it is just this endless thing. There's no start or finish, and it's harder to kind of measure. And this reminded me of a principle or a writing rule that he has done throughout his career, which is writing for a certain amount of time every single day. Not a certain amount of words, not a certain amount of pages, but focusing on a certain amount of time that he's hitting. And I remember hearing a bunch of other comedians in a documentary talking about when they visited Jerry's apartment, they basically would see a calendar that had X's on it. And the X's actually represented each day that Jerry wrote for 4 hours that day, which 4 hours of writing is very intense. And it went to show the discipline and the care that he put into his craft. So of course, for us, it may not be 4 hours or even 2 hours. It might be 1 or 30 minutes or 10 minutes, but whatever it is, give yourself that start and finish. I find that to be something I resonated with a little more than just a certain amount of pages or or a certain amount of words that are getting out that day. And what I loved about this was him talking about just putting in the time. There's a story of him inside of his apartment, staring out the window, seeing a bunch of construction workers work really hard all day. And he's like, if these guys can show up and they can work hard, whether it's rain or shine, snow or mud, they're showing up. I can do that. I can do that for my craft. He's like, I can sit here and put in the time. And so when it comes to putting in the time, it isn't just about the output that he's getting, because there are times where he's mentioned that he'll write the same sentence 20 different times, but just putting in the time of sitting there, even if it's not doing anything, but just thinking. I mean, a lot of times that's what writing is. It's giving yourself the space to think. And then the writing part is actually the capture that happens when that thought originates. Now, the second rule that I found that was pretty game changing was also in the same Tim Ferriss interview and in regards to the advice he was sharing with his daughter. And it was around setting a 24-hour limit before you actually share any of your work, any of your writing, telling people about it, showing it to people. And the reasoning for that was because those first 24 hours are for you. And sometimes when you come up with an idea, you're really excited about it, and you share it with somebody a little too early, their reaction may be enough for you to kill that idea right then and there. And then it never has a chance to actually find its legs and flourish. And I'm sure that he was thinking about this first in a joke context, where if you told a couple of your comedian friends what you were working on and they gave a bad reaction to that joke, or they didn't think it was funny, you may have ended it prematurely instead of actually trying it out and getting the audience's opinion, right? And seeing how it lands before you write it off. And so the idea of preserving that joy of discovering an idea and having come up with it, it's kind of rewarding yourself for that. I found this rule to be particularly useful because not just does it give you more fun and joy in just the process itself of writing and finding ideas that you're excited about, not just, what's your friend going to be excited about? What's this other person going to think of it? But you're starting with yourself. But of course, when you wait 24 hours, just by looking at it and coming back to it again, your brain automatically wants to add things, remove things. And if that is something that piece of writing needs, it's just a much more natural way for you to be able to put some final touches on it before you even share it again, right? So it's like the first draft is for you, enjoy it. Now, the third rule that I love is something that Jerry has embodied throughout his entire career, more so than something that he just gave as a tip in some interview. And it's this idea of honing, refining, tightening, sharpening. And in his context, it was his act. And he came from the era of comedy where you didn't do a new hour and film it every year and drop it on Netflix. It was the kind of thing where once you came up with your hour, it was like maybe at the end of your career, you would film it and release it, or you would have maybe 2 or 3 hours of real, raw, great, hard-hitting comedy that maybe you did 3 specials in your lifetime, right? So he's from that era of comedy where it was all about perfecting that hour, word by word. And his book right back here, Is This Anything?, is actually a great masterclass because it takes every joke that he's ever written, and from start to finish, you can see, like he mentions it himself, that if you read this as a stand-up comic, like there's a whole wealth of knowledge in here because you get to see on paper, like almost envisioning how he would write this and how perfect and tight some of the things are. Like there's just no fat, not a single extra word, not a single extra syllable. And this is just how he thought about writing, which shows in any of the jokes that you open up to and read in that book. And so there's something about that I think we can take into our own process, which is this idea that writing is really one word at a time, one sentence at a time. And looking at it with that really sharp lens that Jerry has, of course, he had the stage to be able to test out a lot of this writing. And every night when you are doing a couple different sets and getting to try this out, a joke 3, 4, 5 times a night, okay, now you've been able to test it in real time and cut it down to, hey, this word at the end of this sentence hits the hardest, right? Or when I say this one, it kills the rest of my set. Nothing works after that. So I love this idea of editing. Writing is editing. I think it gives something to strive for. When you have something you've written that's a whole page or that you're not quite clear about, just like having a joke, oh, there's something funny here, but I'm not quite sure exactly what it is, and just refining and refining and refining. And when you get it down to like a tight 10 words, it just feels so good. You're like, wow, okay, I feel like I filled the gap between the thought that I had and the clarity that was missing between how I needed to write it and share it. A lot of that is through removal once you've gotten that first draft out. And so just the way that Jerry thought about removing, replacing, substituting words, and also something that he did on stage. So he's mentioned in a couple interviews also how he looks at all his jokes as this Rolodex where it's like, okay, what's he gonna need? And he's written something about vacuums, right? Like 10 years ago, and somebody happened to turn on the vacuum, let's say while he's in a club doing his jokes. Okay, cool. That joke might seem like it was done in the moment on the spot, but guess what? He wrote something 10 years ago and it triggered his brain to go, oh, vacuum, pull that out. And so the same way that comedians are able to do this, they've written, hundreds and thousands of jokes over their career, but they have their top ones, just like the same way they have their top stories, right? Their top 10, top 50 stories that they tell over and over. They have that with their hardest hitting jokes. And the idea behind this is that there's no wasted words. So if you've written something, even if it's bad writing, I mean, look at how Jerry was able to save, like the picture on the back of this book is him sitting in New York with all of his jokes over the years on, yellow legal pads just everywhere, right? And it's like he saved all of that. And so there's value in being able to do that. It makes the cutting easier. It makes the replacing and substituting a little more manageable. And it may seem like bad writing in the moment, but hey, 10 days later, you might need it, and it might be the perfect puzzle piece into something else that makes that part great writing. So anyways, I hope these were useful. I didn't just want to give the common break the chain and all these other rules that, are already super common out there. There are many other hidden gems that Jerry has revealed in interviews, conversations, podcasts, all of this stuff over the years. So I hope some of these were useful and resonated with you like they did with me. Drop a comment with what you thought. Thanks for hanging out. I'll see you on the next one.